Before we start sewing, it's really important that we know what all the different parts of the sewing machine are and how we use them and what we use them for. So the first part of the sewing machine that's really important is where we put our spool thread. Now up here is the spool thread. That's the thread that we use to sew, and I'll go through how to thread that a bit later. The next part is the presser foot. That's down a bit further down here. This is used to hold our fabric down, and it helps also guide it through the sewing machine. The next part is the stitch selector. That's up the top here. We don't use that very much in fabrics, but you can use it to do different types of stitching. So for example, I can just pull that out and move it and choose different stitching to sew with. We'll mainly do zigzag and straight stitch, so we just need to leave it there like that. The next part is the hand wheel. Now that's around the side here. With the hand wheel is directly connected to the needle, which I'll show in a minute. Now, the hand wheel, we always turn it towards us. It avoids the thread getting tangled if we turn it towards us like that. I'll show you as I'm turning, it moves the needle, which is just down here. Now, we always want to leave the needle up, and as you can see, the needle has a little hole in it, and that's where we put our thread through. And that stitches our fabric together. The next thing is the thread guide. Now, the thread guide's up the top. That's used to help guide the thread through when we're threading the sewing machine, and you just hook it around like that. There's a few other guides that you can use throughout the threading process, but we'll go through that a little bit later. Now, the next thing is the take-up lever. The take-up lever is just this little groovy thing just here. We just pretty much use that to guide the thread also. The only important thing is to make sure that you turn the hand wheel towards you and make sure that that's always up the top, so that then you'll know your needle is always up, so then you can easily take your fabric out of the sewing machine. The next thing that we're going to look at is the thread regulator. Now the thread regulator is in two different spots. This is one. This is where it controls the tension of your stitch, so how loose and how tight it is. We want to make sure it lines up with that red line there. So we want to make sure that's always lined up when we look at the sewing machine. This is also another one just here. We just want to make sure that that's always facing 0. The dot is lined up with 0, just to make sure that our sewing is nice and successful. The next thing we're going to look at is the power switch. That's on the side near the hand wheel just here. That pretty much has 3 different settings, 0, 1 and 1 with a light. So 0 is off, 1 is on, and 1 with a light is on with a light. So we just want to make sure that's turned off when we finish sewing, or even walk away from our sewing machine so that no one else can get hurt from that. The next part is our stitch width dial, which is just on this panel on the side here. It's right at the top. Now with our stitch width dial, we don't want to touch this at all. This moves our needle. We just want to move this around depending on how wide we want our stitch. If we want it straight, so no width, we go 0. If we want it more wide, the wider it goes, the bigger the number, or the bigger the number, the wider the stitch goes. We'll leave it on 0 at the moment. The next one we want to look at is the length. Now we've looked at the width. Now this shows you or determines how long your stitch wants to be. You just turn it around like that to change the length. Generally I leave it about 2.5 in the middle there, but that just controls the length. It also controls whether you go straight or reverse. Your sewing machine will automatically go forward, but he said if you want to go backwards or sew backwards, you just lift this up and then sew, and it will sew all the way backwards. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you is the bobbin and the bobbin case, which is over here to the left of the sewing machine. We just open this latch. If you can see, I just lift that out and then pull that out, and it gets my bobbin, which is in the middle there, and then my bobbin case. Pretty much much. I'll show you a bit more about that later, but that's just where that's located. You just close that up now, and then we'll go to our next part. The next part is the take-up lever for the presser foot. So the presser foot can go up and down through a take-up lever that holds the fabric down. If you put it down, it lifts it up to release your fabric. So you'd put your fabric in, put it down, and then so lift it up and then pull the fabric out. You always have it down when you're sewing. I'll just show you where it is. It's around the back here, just down there. So you can just lift that up while you're sewing. You don't really need to look at it once you know where it is. The next part I'm going to show you is our pedal. Now our pedal's just here. You'll see that it has two plugs, one there and one here. This one goes into the wall, this one goes into the sewing machine around the side here. You always want your cords going around the back of the sewing machine so that there's no safety concerns and you don't get it tangled. One last thing for those advanced sewers, this one down here also controls different things to do with your sewing machine. It controls whether your fabric automatically gets pulled through the sewing machine. So we want that to happen. We don't want it just to stay still. So if we make sure every time we go to the sewing machine, we just make sure that that's lined up with the green and that one's lined up with the zigzag stitch and the straight stitch. That's pretty much all you need to know about the sewing machine.